Dr. Levitt,
Yes,
Matt,
please.
thank you for first of all coming today,
It's a pleasure.
and fitting it in with the conference season, but more importantly for sort of sharing your insights, because the whole agenda of this conference is taking people's experience from public and private sector, from different geographies, different expertise, to share that we can plan the roadmap. So we really appreciated that.
It's a real pleasure.
The session you just talked about, one of the things, I'm going to pick on a couple of things if I may. One of them was the data issue and IP tracking. One of them is the Terra Finance Tracking Center about collaboration. And one of them is the sort of organized crime to the opportunism.
Right.
So just want to pick up on a couple of those and sort of see what we can share. But we can start with the data issue. Identifying people, being able to connect people across different data sets so that we can action against them. Can you talk a little about the IP address and the significance of that?
So in parallel to the need to be able to track foreign terrorist fighters as they either return home or as they go somewhere else, exit to some other battlefield, it's really important to be able to track the financing of foreign terrorist fighters, either money that they're getting from the Islamic State itself, or money that they're getting from other friends, or money that they're raising on their own. And one area that has proven to be particularly useful is tracking IP addresses. Not everything will work that way. You have hawaladars and other informal value transfer systems that may not be done online, but a whole lot of banking is still done in the formal or semi-formal sector. And if you take out your cell phone right now and check your bank account, that IP address is something that authorities can get the authority to track. And that's very, very powerful. It's also something that is inherently shareable across national boundaries.
It's like a common currency.
It's exactly like a common currency. It's data that helps put a name to a dollar or a yen or a real, wherever someone may be, and isn't always going to be the silver bullet, but can be a very useful tool to help us track terror financing, including small amounts of money.
So the micropayments as opposed to the big laundering issue. So you can attack both dimensions.
Exactly, and the micropayments are what's really important now. It doesn't cost a lot of money to travel, doesn't cost a lot of money to do insurgency, doesn't cost a lot of money to do small-scale terrorism. If you think about the Halloween Day vehicular attack in Manhattan, it cost what, maybe a couple $100 to rent the car and a whole bunch of other things, you know, probably a lot less than that. So we won't necessarily catch everything, but this will be, has already proven to be, a very effective tool in helping us track some of these payments.
But as we talked about in some of the other sections, looking for triggers and leading indicators, it's got a financial aspect of cutting off the money flow. It also must be a leading indicator to help identify intent.
Clearly, and this is nothing new. You know, the 9/11 Commission found that counter-terror finance was one of the most powerful tools we have. They noted, however, that trying to stem the flow of funds, well, that's kind of nice, but always the more powerful tool will be following the money. And as a corollary to that, if you can follow the trails of funds through IP addresses, then that can be very potentially very powerful.
So it does feel as though it's sort of hidden in there as the sort of secret to maybe untap this?
There isn't a little bit of a secret sauce here. The real secret to it, though, is facilitating public-private cooperation, right? The banks will have this information. They're the ones who are facilitating transfers. We have other information in the public sector. You need to be able to better marry these. The UK has a very interesting anti-money laundering, counter-terror finance joint center for public-private cooperation, and that might be an interesting model for others.
Yeah, you talked about that UK model. Can you describe that a little bit more?
No.
Good, okay, for obvious reasons. One of the things that I was going to ask about was, for example, legislation like GDPR.
Yeah.
And whether that becomes a constraint to what we can do, or whether in the interest of national security, etc., that's something that can be accommodated.
Look, there's always going to have to be a balance. We're never going to be able to do, from a law enforcement and intelligence counterterrorism perspective, everything we want to do, and we shouldn't necessarily be doing it. We have to balance privacy and other things. That's the real world. We don't want to change the type of lives we live, the democracies that we live in, etc., just because we're under threat. But we want to be safe. So there is a very a very serious balance that has to be found. For example, I'm all for privacy protection, but I'm also all for people feeling that they can, walk down the street without being fearful of attack.
And worship at a weekend in safety, etc.
Absolutely.
Many places.
Yeah.
What's the Terra Finance Tracking Center? Can you just give us a little bit of a sort of summary of that initiative,
Sure.
and how that drives collaboration across borders, maybe with some people who maybe aren't always that good at collaborating?
So the Terra Finance Tracking Center, or the TFTC, was a deliverable for the Riyadh summit. President Trump was going to Riyadh, and he told U.S. departments and agencies, I want deliverables. This was something that was actually off the shelf that Treasury had thought of a long time ago.
Wow.
And it was dusted off and polished off a little bit. And frankly, in the context of the GCC rift, it's proven to be pretty important, because it's been a bridging gap mechanism to bring together all parties in the GCC to work with the United States on this common shared threat that we all want to deal with of terrorist financing around the world and in this region in particular. And we've been able, by the way, to use it for Sunni extremism, Shia extremism. The last one targeted IRGC Quds Force entities. Others have targeted ISIS, Daesh, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And I'd like to see it used more as a bridging gap to bring these countries together. One of the key things that they've been pointing their fingers at each other about has been, are you doing enough on terror finance? So this is a great way for the United States to play a bridging role, not a mediator role, but a bridging role, getting everybody to the table for these joint, shared, collaborative actions.
Because this joint shared collaborative action sounds like such a scalable model to be shared outside the region, because obviously it triggered with the US visit to Riyadh, but this is something from Central America to Southeast Asia to parts of Sub-Saharan Africa, potentially as a model that can be repeated and extended.
Well, let's say the TFTC, do all it can, but then yes, theoretically, it could prove to be a very useful model just to get regional alliances together on an area of shared concern.
Well, I think that really is the spirit of this conference, and why everyone's brought together in Doha, is to share best practices and work out how we together can address both the current threat and almost anticipate the next coming threat, so we can manage it more effectively. So with that, I appreciate you coming. Thank you for getting us into your schedule, and thank you for sharing your best practice and wisdom with this group.
Thanks.
Much appreciated.
Thanks for having me at the conference. Appreciate it.
Thank you.